So in DC Rebirth, a special character was introduced. A character secretly revealed in the pages of Convergence because next to no one read Convergence, and in Rebirth almost personified everything good about it. That character was John Kent, son of Clark Kent and Lois Lane, an almost impossible child. Since his appearance, John has been a breath of fresh air, and his character added something special to the DC universe. Some say hope, but I think what it also gave was something else. The promise of a future, that something was coming. The promise of a new Superman, if only for a bit, similar to Dick Grayson stepping into the role of Batman, or Terry, if for Batman Beyond. However, it would be dishonest to think that that was all John was. John was a character that, in his journey of understanding himself and his powers, he helped make other characters more interesting. Not just Clark and Lois, who we all knew would be great parents, but also in Damian Wayne, Sam Lane, Mxyzptlk, the Titans, Tim Drake, Batman, etc. John rippled through the DC universe, and in a way, I felt he really would have been a great fit for the JSA. And under the gentle hands of Peter Tomasi and Dan Jurgens, John Kent was, in my opinion, the face of DC Rebirth. But something happened no one thought would have happened. Brian Michael Bendis took over. Ignoring the smaller details and focusing on the facts, Bendis took it upon himself as the writer of Superman in Action Comics, formerly written by Tomasi and Jurgens respectively, to age up John Kent while he was, hang on, let me check my notes here, being tortured on Earth 3 by evil versions of his parents, Ultraman and Superwoman. Ultimately, the character was regulated to Bendis' control, being used mostly for his Legion of Superhero book. While this was allowed to fly as anyone's guess, with some saying Dan DiDio is to blame, who, even after his firing, has been sort of the scapegoat for things currently bad in DC, but I don't really care because it's been done, and it's not what we're talking about. The reason I set that up is because I wanted to prepare you for what came next. After Bendis left the book, the question then came to what John would be, and his fate was left in the hands of two writers. Philip Kennedy Johnson, who handled the character for a few issues in Superman, and Tom Taylor, who was currently handling the character in the story of Superman, Son of Kal-El. And that's what we're here to discuss. So to understand Superman, Son of Kal-El, you have to understand the state of the DCU at the time, especially in regards to Superman and John. We've already mentioned that John had been aged up on Earth 3, but also Superman had come forward with his identity as Clark Kent, and yeah, that was weird, but the gist is that everyone knows that Superman is Clark Kent. He was married to Lois Lane, and that the son is John Kent. Superman later leaves to help free slaves in Warworld, and a much better story in Philip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics. Really great story if you haven't been reading it. But back to Superman, Son of Kal-El. I will be honest, as much as I hated what Bendis did, depriving not just us of John, but also deprived Clark, Lois, and Damian of 7 years with him, I generally wanted to like this book, as there was no to go but up from Bendis. Or so I thought. And I shall put it simply. Superman, Son of Kal-El goes back and forth between being woke garbage and a generally boring story. I've been waiting 12 issues to start this review, giving it effectively 2 trades worth of time to give it a fair shot. And honestly, I can't anymore. I just can't. I can't. This is not worth the price I'm paying monthly to just be uninterested at best and just sort of ugh, at worst. So to save time, because I've definitely rambled on enough, I'm only going to focus on a few aspects in these 12 issues and recommend that you read the issues yourself from your own, to form your own opinion on whether or not my critique has any merit, and you might enjoy it. And if you do, more power to you. I know some people that do. So the premise of this story is, in itself, hinges on one question that John asks his father. Why don't you do more? And this sets up the story and John's character, as well as Tom Taylor and how he views superheroes, as well as Superman himself. In response to this question, Clark says that he never felt that it was his place because he never felt like it was his planet. In context, I get both sides of this, as John is pointing out the social, economic, and climate issues on Earth, and Clark's perspective is pretty much what it always has been.
I am not a hero. I'm definitely not a president. And no, I'm not an officer. You know what I am? I am an idiot with a box and a screwdriver. Just passing through, helping out, learning.
But I think the wording is wrong here, and when you look at the title of the book, Superman, Son of Kal-El, you sort of understand why. See, writers like Taylor and Bendis don't seem to really respect the idea of Clark Kent. At least that's how I take it. And they see him as sort of a fake persona in a way similar to that of when people say there is no Bruce Wayne, only Batman. It's just the kind of idea that doesn't add up. The general consensus seems to be he's always been a Kryptonian who lived on Earth, which I don't think that's accurate. Like, yes, he is a Kryptonian raised on Earth, but it's like the same way with, say, Goku in Dragon Ball Z. Goku is a Saiyan, but he's lived his entire life on Earth. He's more of an Earthling than anyone else, if you think about it. John brings up that unlike most superheroes, Clark could be a greater engine for change, but Clark says he's always thought John should be the one to do it, sort of the child of two worlds thing. This, in a couple of ways, sort of fits more in the line with sidekicks who feel the world their predecessors, aka the past generations, created, and I think they feel that they could be doing better, and despite the feel to it, you sort of get the idea that John, and by extent Taylor, has a different idea on the role of superheroes. They should be vehicles for change. And I remember this line here.
I'm sorry to break this to you, but Captain America is a social justice warrior.
And this also sets the tone for the rest of the book. The book in 12 issues will be what I think is a definition of a woke story, quote unquote. So let's understand what I mean by the term woke. So here's one that addresses an important issue like, say, climate change, refugees, etc., and ultimately feels like just scratching the surface on the issue is enough. Like, we talked about it and we said it's bad, so that's good. Let's applaud ourselves, pat ourselves on the back, and we're really showing how good of our character is. Son of Kal-El will talk about the climate, the refugees, and really do nothing to explore these issues. Instead, it'll try to go further with, well, the guy here is just evil. Bendix is evil, and, there's nothing redeeming about him. And the issue is, well, what about those refugees? You mean those refugees we saw, 2 issues in? Yeah, we're not talking about them anymore. They don't matter. What happened to those refugees? Well, one was being arrested. Doesn't matter anymore. We're going forward. And do I think these issues are important? Of course. And I think comics are a good vehicle to explore those issues. And as I've said before, people and readers and whatever, no matter what your medium, they will always like to be informed of an issue. They don't like to be lectured about it. And this is sort of mostly lecturing people, because you're getting one side of a complex issue. And it's something I said about the episode Rosa for Doctor Who, which that episode just goes, racism is bad. Now, here's the thing, the only people that disagree with that claim are racist. And yeah, so why would they watch Rosa? Why would they watch Rosa? To root for the space racist? I mean, okay, sure. It's like when I don't know. I have no idea. It feels like this scene all over again.
If you're racist and homophobic, you're not even gonna know who this nigga is. You can't watch Empire.
So it should be noted that Tom Taylor did this before with Injustice, where Superman has a dream where Lois and his child survives, and years later he and his daughter talk about doing more in regards to the climate and the future of Earth, and that he will always be viewed as an outsider, and Lara agrees to address the UN as a child of two worlds. Oddly enough, that was done better, and the scenes almost look exactly alike in some ways, but if you read Injustice, then you know Superman hasn't done any better there. And again, both written by Tom Taylor. So next I want to talk about the characters, and honestly, yeah, they're all kind of a bore here, and it's because they lack any real depth. There's no tension to the story on what this should be. So John's family, Lois, Jonathan Kent, Martha Kent, his grandparents, pretty much exist to validate most of what John does. And even if Batman has any concerns, they're met with, well...
Have you stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, you're Jill?
And Taylor thinks he's doing something interesting by implying Lois may have a problem with John coming out as bisexual or gay. Like, honestly, John hasn't really said what he is. But it's Lois Lane. Who for a moment would think that Lois would all of a sudden would have some problem with her son? Like what? Now, to be fair, there is a good story here in John coming out, because she's had to deal with the fact that she's missed out on 7 years of John's life. In a lot of ways, he's an entirely new person to her. Alright? Antagonists like Bendix and Luthor are really just so evil that they along with John, take away from whatever issue they want to talk about. It's sort of like the whole issue with Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. Yeah, should Chris have said the joke, should Will have responded that way? That doesn't really matter. We're at the Oscars. We should be talking about people's awards and what they did. Next to no one talked about that. Jay Nakamura and the organization Truth always feels like it's one step away from being Antifa, but ultimately the problem is Jay Nakamura himself is defined really as being just John's love interest. Even whenever he talks about himself, all 2 times in 12 issues, it's mostly for John's sake. Now, on to John himself and his portrayal of Superman. Honestly, it's hard to dislike John's intentions or what he's trying to do on the surface. In other words, I think the story Tom Taylor's trying to tell is commendable, but the question is, how much can you go with it? How much? I think he's done a disservice by being aged up the way he was, which is not Tom Taylor's fault. He's working with what he's got. I don't think anyone at DC is like, well, yeah, de-age him. No, it's already been done. Let's just keep going, and we have a crisis event coming soon. If need be, we'll de-age him then. And the comic is, again, very set on making him seem perfect, or at the very least, set up as a character that because he's speaking on because he wants his issues, he can do no wrong. It's sort of this.
How dare you!
And we plod, strong and brave, yes, Queen. And there's a story to be told here, but I think at best Tom Taylor has gone the wrong direction to tell the story, and it's primarily his view on Superman and stories not understanding how important Clark Kent is. So Tom Taylor has applauded himself. He's gone this many issues without Superman, John, having to punch anyone. It's like it's a new kind of hero who's trying to fight the good fight. Kind of, sort of, not really. John's story is that he's Superman, but he hasn't figured out what that means to him yet. I don't think it does a good job at that. John never seems to doubt himself, and even when he does, he's automatically validated. I think what this story wants to be is something like Superman Grounded, where Clark, after the events of War of the Superman, New Krypton, I believe that's when it takes place, he just sort of goes walking around. He goes around helping out when he can. He talks a woman out of jumping off a building. He burns the stash of a bunch of drug dealers. He stops a dude that's perving on a woman at a diner. He just going out, helping out where he can. And I think that should have been the case.
I think if anyone wants to have a good understanding of the relationship between Clark Kent and Superman, once you look at something like Paul Dini and Alex Ross's Justice League, the world's greatest superheroes, where in that story, Superman wants to address the issue of world hunger. And in that story, what he does is, as Clark Kent, he goes undercover. And one would ask, well, why would he have to go undercover? And I think what people would ask is, why would he have to go undercover as Superman? Well, people are on guard on Superman. He wants people to be able to talk to him. And as Clark Kent, he can do that. Also, I think he's more comfortable talking to people as Clark Kent. But anyway, with Clark Kent, he has access to other stuff. He can get interviews, I think a bit easier, and with also less pressure. And what he does is able to research, and he gets enough information for himself to talk to Congress, and Congress talks to the UN and whatnot, and Superman goes out delivering food, and it goes relatively well, but it's still not quite enough. That's when Clark Kent steps back in. Clark Kent, the son of a farmer, goes in and he teaches this group of kids, like, this is how you plant, this is how you feed people. And that's sort of the brilliance of it, the sort of subtle change, the almost active random kindness that Clark Kent is able to be a different engine for change than Superman can. Right? It's sort of it. And look at something like, say, there was that quote, Superman is what I can do, Clark Kent is who I am. I think by removing that nature, that sort of identity, you sort of later set it up a failure for John, because now John is always Superman. When people see John on the street, it's like, no, it's John Kent. No, it's Superman. Someone calls him John Kent. And as well as going to Superman Grounded, the ability to just sort of walk around and help John understand the world he's in, and even more tell a story about, say, how the media perceives him, how the superhero and supervillain community perceives him. Point out that John does not have a rogues gallery yet, which means he's going to be relegated to the background soon. Superheroes, no matter who they are, no matter what legs they're picking up, if they don't have their own rogue, they're more likely not going to last. But you look at people like Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, the Teen Titans, they have interesting rogues. Overall, what I'm saying is there should be more room for sort of back and forth with the idea of the identity of John Kent and the identity of Superman. And you can have a lot of fun with that. Like, have John Kent be a member of Truth, and he's keeping the fact that he's Superman hidden
from the organization Truth. Like he's living this other life with Jay Nakamura, and Lois is saying you should probably tell him if you're serious about it. And John's not ready. He likes having that anonymity, and even more have sort of like, so remember, you can do a progressive story, an even more interesting story on the organization Truth, using something like, say, this quote from Liberty's Kids.
But you must learn to distinguish between a patriotic act of protest and mob rule. The tyranny of the people can be just as brutal as the tyranny of the crown.
That's a great scene. Have John sort of question the motives of the organization Truth. Like, yeah, they mean well, but they go a bit too far sometimes, and maybe they need a bit more structure. Like, it needs to stand for something, which Truth doesn't really stand for anything outside of the vague concept of truth. And by using villains like Bendix and Lex Luthor, there's no room for nuance. And nuance does occur in DC Comics, especially when it comes to really progressive issues. Look at stories like, say, Exit Stage Left, the Snagglepuss Chronicles, a story where Snagglepuss is reinvented as a gay playwright in the 1950s. That is an interesting story. The stories to do with that, with McCarthyism and the House of Un-American Activities Committee, that is a great story. It pretty much wrote itself. And then something like, say, the Flintstones comic, where the Flintstones comic deals with just life. There's the idea of immigrant labor, of art, of marriage. There's a whole plethora of ideas that you can explore with comics, with superheroes. These, like, it doesn't stop at just superheroes. And John can tell a whole bunch of stories. Supergirl did a story about, what was it? About this non-binary or trans. I forget, but it was a good story. A bit flawed in some areas, but it got the message across. I think it did a great job. What I'm saying is, there's a plethora of ideas that Tom Taylor could have gone for telling the John Kent story, and I think he chose sort of the laziest one. And I think, in part, and I could be wrong, Tom Taylor can totally prove me wrong in the rest of this story, which I do not intend to keep reading. Well, maybe the trades, but I don't think he's yet to understand what makes Superman important. He sort of views the powers of Superman as important, and not so much who he is, who Clark Kent is. And again, Future State had a great story about that, with Worlds at War, where we see an entire generation of people in the future who worship Superman. Like, they know that he's Clark Kent. They show off his journal in high school, like, this is deep stuff. Like, no, it's math equations, right? That's it. That's all there is to it. This girl says, you guys have no idea who Clark Kent is, who Superman is. And if you don't understand Clark Kent, you don't understand Superman. And that's the same thing for Bruce Wayne and Batman, same thing for Hal Jordan and Green Lantern, John Stewart, Green Lantern. If you don't understand the person behind the costume, you've made a lackluster story. And John Kent has nothing going for him. That's sad when you say it like that, but he really doesn't, because those 5 years, what does it say about his character? Is he doubting himself? Does he have, like, certain unresolved resentment with his parents because, hey, evil versions of them tortured him? Does he really dislike certain people? Does he need time to himself? Does he severely doubt what he does? Or does he think he's infallible? Or does he think that, like, what does he think? I think what John thinks is he has to be everywhere, and he has to learn that he doesn't have to be everywhere. How does John want to imply that change? You see these covers like, no school until climate change, or protesting climate change. Like, well, is that what he wants? Because he's been outed, he doesn't get really that chance. I think what John should have done, and what Taylor should have done, would have been better service to, is to take him away from his parents and the league, and everyone's wondering what he's going to do. Taylor literally started his run off. The first couple of pages is talking about how important John's birth is, which, I said he's an impossible child, but Batman and Wonder Woman are thinking about he could be anything. Batman's like, he's concerned. Woman's like, no, he's the best of his parents. He's got the powers of Superman and the upbringing of like Lois. I'm like, well, hold on. He could still fail. He could still ultimately fail. We're putting too much pressure on him. While Batman is more likely wrong to presume that he's dangerous or could be dangerous, Diana's sort of wrong to put the pressure like he'll do everything right, like he'll be fine. Like, no, he's going to need guidance, and no one really provides that to him. And if I may, I want to talk about... I want to read you something from the pages of Peter Tomasi's Superman. John, you're not like the boy who outgrew their shirt and donated it. I'm afraid someday soon, too soon, you will have to pick it up and embrace the S for yourself. It's not about our powers or strength or heat vision, it's about character. It means doing the right thing when no one else will, even when you're scared, even when you think no one is looking. This is his character. This is Superman's character. The question is, what does the S mean to John? And this is a question I think everyone who wants to embrace the mantle of a superhero has to ask themselves. What does that mean to me? What does the bat symbol mean to me? What does the tiara of Wonder Woman? What does that mean? What does the lightning bolt? What does the Green Lantern ring mean to me as I step into this role? I don't think John has ever really found time to say that. I think, again, something like Superman Grounded, who's just on his own, I think would work. And if you were to sort of play up the idea that John might be a bit more vilified, that he's sort of crumbling under the pressure of having to be effectively the world's greatest superhero, Superman, I think that would be better. But Taylor doesn't seem to want to tell that story. Or at the very least, I don't think he thinks he can. And if you look at other stories where he has Superman, Superman either dies rather quickly, or he's kind of evil. It's kind of it. So, no, I think there's a good story to be told here. I just don't think it's being told well, if I'm being as generous as possible. And the reason I want to sort of trim down on any sort of vitriol directed at Tom Taylor is because, I mean, ultimately he's just a guy who wrote a book, all right? And I've given his book 12 issues, not for me. Again, I want to like this book. I did. I think there's a good story to be told here. I think there's some nuance that is missing from this kind of story. But no, we're busy patting ourselves on the back. John's bisexual now. Oh, great. And if you disagree, well, you haven't been paying attention to John. I'm like, well, no, John has had nothing going on. There's no indication that John was bisexual. It also didn't matter. All right, just tell a good story. Make Jay Nakamura interesting. Make this be a story where John isn't ultimately right every time. Leave it in the air sometimes. Have him make a colossal mistake, and people call him out for it. Have Jay Nakamura be evil, like everyone thinks he should be. Alright? Because, I don't know, that scene where, the house blew up, and he was still kind of chill about it was kind of weird to me. And remember, the main reason John and Jay are together is because John doesn't have to worry about protecting him because he can't be hurt. And that is apparently John's kink. Anyway, with that in mind, this brings me to close here. If you're new to the Bucket Think Tank, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. Check out some other videos, and I'll catch you all later. This is Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching. As always, may your fandom serve you well.